All right, welcome everyone. For those that are new to BRAG, the Berkeley Research Administrators Group, our mission is to provide a forum for collegial interaction in the research administration community. We do this by facilitating presentations by subject matter experts, creating an environment to foster peer-to-peer exchanges, and seeking and sharing best practices. I'm now going to turn it over to Sarah for the introduction of today's topic and presenters.
Thank you, Hannah. Today we're going to have a presentation on working with the state of California, so hopefully you're all here for that. And we're going to have some expert presenters, and they will share their best practices for the pre and post-award stage while working with the state of California. So joining us today is, in no particular order, Angela Ford from the Sponsored Projects Office, SPO, Angie Martinez, also from SPO, Tan Nguyen from SPO, Angela Brito Baldwin from the URSO region, and Amy Fritzen from the URSO region. As you all know, this is recording, so we're going to have this session made available on the BRAG website, and you can share it with all of your friends, colleagues, family, whoever you want, for those who are unable to attend. So I will turn it over to our lovely presenters to take it away.
Thank you, Sarah. Hello, everybody. I'm going to share screen. Or actually, before I do that, just so I know, I can't do polls. So we're going to do it old school way. I'm just telling you guys now. Okay, so I'm going to share screen. Let's see. There we go. Hopefully that works. Can you guys see it? Does it look okay? Big enough?
Looks
Excellent.
good.
Okay, great. We are really excited here to have been invited by the BRAG Steering Committee to present on working with the state of California. And this is an update of a presentation we actually did at a 2022 RAC Forum. And there are some changes in the last 2 years in various areas. So even if you've heard this before, I think it will be very useful. And we've got a very packed slide deck. So that'll be a really great resource for everyone too. I also want to say that we do have a number of polls, and I'll try to do it. Grab a pen because and jot down your answers, and as we go through them, mark which ones you got right, because I'll do a raffle for somebody at the end who got the most correct answers. So write them down. Honor system, everybody. I know you guys are all honorable. Okay, so thank you, Sarah, for doing that lovely introduction. So I get to skip this slide here. We will move right into, this is just an outline of what we're covering today. We're going to start with a quick overview and history, and then we're going to move to the proposal process, followed by the award process, award management, and then we're going to finish up with an update on Caltrans and some tips. I want to let everybody know that we are going to give the slides to Sarah, and they're going to be available after the meeting. And I know that the invitation said to send questions in advance. If you are listening and you think of a question, feel free to put it in the chat, and hopefully we can get to that. If it's not right during the presentation, I know I'm not good at looking at the chat while I'm presenting, but at the end, we can also go through questions too. So, and whatever we don't get to, we'll try to answer offline and maybe send the answers through the BRAG listserv. Okay, so let me go to, that's just our overview slide. Okay, so what are we talking about when we say the state of California? State agencies are under the executive branch of the state of California government, and there are approximately 235 state agencies and departments. UC Berkeley works with roughly 50 of them. So what I have here on the right, these are the logos for the top 5 that fund UC Berkeley sponsored projects, and they provide approximately 75% of all the sponsored project funding. And guess what? A lot of them were the most problematic sponsors for us. That's probably no surprise, right? Maybe the least problematic one is Department of Education. But when I say problematic, they're just challenging to work with. I know who knows who will listen to this. So we do have a lot of experience working with these sponsors. Okay, so this, I just kind of want to give you some perspective of where State of California funding is in the portfolio of the sponsored projects that all of us support for the campus. So State of California funding averages about 13% of the campus sponsored project portfolio in the past 3 fiscal years. You'll see in fiscal year 2023, there was a big uptick there. So that was actually about 20%, but if you average it out, it works out to still be about 13%, which is kind of where we roughly land historically. Okay. So the next thing I thought would be really important to kind of cover as an overview is when working with the state is indirect costs. So UC Office of the President established UC rates for projects funded by the state of California. And these are the indirect cost rates used for state-funded projects. Currently, our campus rate our on-campus rate is 35%, and the off-campus rate is 25%. So while UC rates were slated to increase to 40 for on-campus projects on July 1, 2024, as I mentioned, probably at a RAC forum, and I think I sent a notice out to the SPO News that UC Office of the President, the CFO, decided to hold at 35 this fiscal year. I think that it's not clear if we're going to escalate to 40 in July 2025. We're told to expect that it'll happen, but we won't know until we're very close to the beginning of that next fiscal year if UCOP will decide to move from 35 to 40. And you'll see there, like you can see January for when the rate was 30%, it actually stayed that rate, not just for a year, but it went from 2019 to 2023 that we were holding at 30%. So if there's any history to that, we might be at 35 for a little while before they move to 40. One other thing I kind of want to mention about the standard State of California UC rates for indirect costs is if the project is for training for UC students, then similar to Fed training grants, 8% is the allowable indirect cost rate. And then the last thing I want to remind everybody is that when the state is a pass-through entity of Fed funds, so like to CFR 200 UG applies, UCB's federally negotiated FNA rate should be used. And the other thing I don't think I've ever mentioned before, and I do want to mention is, for UC rates, there's only one rate. So unlike the federally negotiated rate where you have research, instruction, other sponsored activity, you have these different rates. It's the same rate regardless. Okay, so the next thing I thought would be helpful to go over is indirect cost exceptions or waivers. And there are 2 types of indirect cost waivers. You guys are probably all very familiar with both types. Maybe you just covered it in your RIPDP training, but they are sponsor policy exceptions and vital interest waivers, which are the vital interest ones. Everyone remember, these are the voluntary indirect cost exceptions that are requested by a PI. So for State of California funded projects, similar to nonprofit and federally funded projects, when it is a sponsor policy indirect cost exception, those are approved at the campus level. That actually started in, I would say, I think it was late 2022 that came out. So actually, this slide is definitely a new, is kind of updated from the RAC forum. So for Berkeley, SPO is delegated to review and approve these sponsor policy indirect cost exceptions. Sponsor policy exceptions are documented indirect cost recovery restrictions that broadly apply to a sponsor's grantees. So that means it's not just to Berkeley or to a specific PI that we're going to apply this rate to. It needs to be broadly applied. So document, and what does documented mean? Documented means it's stated in an RFP or an agency website, or in a policy document. So if the we do say though, if the information isn't clearly stated, SPO may ask for additional information, and we could ask it from the PI, the RA, or we might contact the agency directly. All right, so the other type of indirect cost waiver we were talking about, or we're talking about today, is the vital interest waiver. So that's also known as a campus determination exception. And for state-funded projects, those require additional level approval. So that's different from like if it was a non-fed or a nonprofit foundation, that approval to approve a campus determination stays with the campus. But with state-funded projects, similar to federal, those require secondary level approval. So when a PI requests an ID exception, it's considered voluntary reduction of indirect costs, and UCOP requires that the Vice Chancellor for Research on the campus reviews and approves the State of California vital interest waiver. And then a second level of approval is required from the UC Office of the President CFO. So that does take some time, and I'm sure you guys have experienced that if you've had a PI who's asked for this type of waiver. And I do want to underscore that that is rare, that those kind of voluntary reductions will be approved. So I would say that they're pretty much rarely considered. Okay. Now to a bit of history. If you have worked for UC for a long time, you may remember the days of the complicated contract negotiations for many state contracts, state-funded contracts, some contract negotiations. Now, this is separate from even the PIs negotiating the scope of work. Some contract negotiations would take like a year, 2 years, mostly Caltrans. Sorry, Caltrans, but it's true. So the state legislature recognized that the state taxpayers were in many cases funding both sides of these agreement negotiations, because it was a CSU, or a UC, and they were also funding the state agencies. So they decided it would be more cost effective to create a standard set of terms and conditions. And that's where the California Model Agreement came from. So California Assembly Bill 20, called AB 20, you've probably heard us talk about that in the past. It's codified in the California Education Code 67327. This requires, or that required, California Department of General Services, or DGS, to negotiate model contract terms for use by state agencies that fund training, public service, research, any of those that are conducted by campuses of the UC and CSU system. So the California Model Agreement, it was developed as a streamlined collaborative vehicle for the state to conduct business, and you submit the proposal documents which make the actual exhibits they're incorporating into the CMA. So that was that kind of streamlining part. And all the terms and conditions are pre-negotiated before the contract even makes it to the contracting official. Okay, so I'm going to do our first pop quiz. Get your pencils ready. I'm really pretty sure I can't do polls. I'm going to look one more time in case I'm just missing it, but I really don't see polls showing up. So, okay, question. State Assembly Bill 18. Oh, look at that. I just gave you the answer. Okay, fine. Everybody gets a gimme. Requires DGS and CSUs encourage UCs to negotiate a California Model Agreement. Therefore, it is commonly referred to as AB 18. All right, it's AB 20. That's false. Everybody's got one answer correct. Next question, number 2. The indirect cost rate when an on-campus project is funded from a federal agency to a state agency is A, 25%, or B, 35%, or C, 60.5%, or D, none of the above. Okay, I'll give you a second. The answer is C, 60.5 MTDC. And that is when it is for on-campus funding from a Fed agency. Okay, last pop quiz. Each campus has the delegated authority to approve all state of California indirect cost exceptions. True or false? Boo, boo, boo. And the answer is false. Campuses only have delegated authority to approve state of California IDC exceptions for sponsors that have documented indirect recovery restrictions, such as in an RFP or agency website. Okay, so I am now going to move us on to Angela Martinez, who's going to cover the proposal process. Take us away, Angie.
Thank you, Angela. The state proposal process requires much more detail in an effort to clarify. We're going to go in further detail. So any funding solicited or unsolicited requires a proposal rather through one of the university's central office, SPO, IAO, or BCBP. With help from RAs, PIs will need to develop proposals according to the state agency's requirements for review, approval, and submission by a central office. The use of the CMA is aimed to minimize agreement execution delays. As Angela stated previously, a state agency may require use of their specific format for submitting proposals. On a case-by-case basis, the university may use state's desired forms. However, if selected for an award, the proposal must be converted to the CMA template at the time of the final award. Our focus today is talking about the California Model Agreement format for state proposals. And more detail can be found on our website, which has the latest versions of the exhibit files and guidance. So these are the basic elements of a complete proposal of the CMA. The proposal exhibits populated will become a part of the final award. In the interest of time, we're going to try to talk about critical parts, but may not be able to get into full detail. So this is the proposal cover sheet. RA should be working with PIs to complete this form as part of the proposal package uploaded to the Phoebe proposal. Generally, this form is accompanied with a proposal unless the RFP has its own cover sheet that is required. This form can be found on our SPO website. So this is Exhibit A, is it your left or my right? Exhibit A, project summary, abstract, and scope of work. This is what the form looks like. And this is just filling in the information as needed. Here, the PI will insert the project abstract, scope of work. We suggest leaving the third-party section blank. And it could be changed at award stage if needed. A SPO CGO may ask the PI to make revisions to Exhibit A if terms and conditions are included or deliverables are listed here instead of Exhibit A1. For Exhibit A1, the scheduled deliverables, the upper section should list all items that will be delivered to the state, such as tangible deliverables, including all reports and draft reports. The university will own the copyrights to the deliverables, and the state will have the license to use such deliverables. As for the bottom section, in general, I would recommend to use this with caution because the state will own the copyright to the deliverables and the university will only have license to use. So this is normally reserved for things like final reports. Exhibit A2, key personnel. So for key personnel, we suggest to list personnel who contribute to the scientific development or execution of a project in a substantial, measurable way. Generally, SPO suggests not to list students or other named as staff as key personnel because changes will require state agency approval. And for Exhibit A3, authorized representatives and notices, this has been pre-populated in most of the contact details for UC Berkeley individuals is pre-populated in the list, and SPO can help fill out any missing information such as authorized representative or updated CGO. And the state agency will be populated at award stage by the state. So this is Exhibit A4, the use of pre-existing data, copyright works and deliverables. So for section A, leave blank. The state will complete at award stage. Section B and C, please consult with the PI. For Exhibit A4, the use of pre-existing data, copyright works and deliverables, this is what the exhibit looks like. The purpose of this exhibit is to identify all existing intellectual property and or data generated during the project that may have restrictions on the use. So for section A, we recommend leave blank, the state will complete. And for B and C, please consult PI. Oh,
Sorry, am I on the wrong page?
yeah, I think you're.
Sorry. Sorry, go back. Right here?
One more. Yes.
Sorry. Sorry
is
about
the
that,
one.
Angie. Apologies.
So this one, the copyrighted materials, we say for section A to leave it blank. The state will complete, and section C, B and C, please consult with the PI. Next slide. So this is Exhibit A, the CV. Don't forget to include this. This is really important. Sometimes it's for key personnel, sometimes it's left out. So no particular format is required, but please remind PIs and key personnel not to include personal information such as citizenship or home addresses. As for Exhibit A6, current and pending support, provide the pending support for only those individuals listed in Exhibit A2, key personnel, and you could follow the format from Exhibit A6 of the template. So this is Exhibit A7. It's only included if applicable. The scope of work requires the use of third-party information or to either the state or the university. Then if that information will be defined in Exhibit A7, along with any requirement of third party in the use of nature of the confidential information. So we only include it if it's applicable. So this is Exhibit B, the budget and the budget justification. Angela Brito Baldwin is going to go over this exhibit in more detail. However, I just wanted to mention for Exhibit B, the standard template that is needed by the state, and it's not recommended to send out, Excel workbooks of the budget because this could cause confusion. There's expectations, which you will hear more about from Angela Brito Baldwin. And in Angela's experience, consultants have been changed to be sub-awardees in the contract. And Caltrans has a different process for consultants that they call difficult. So take it away, Angela.
Thank you, Angie. The first thing I want to mention about this budget is it's in Word format. So it's not going to do any of the math for you. You're going to have to transfer all of the information from your Excel. The budget's really similar to ours in this, but the main difference would be that our internal budgets break down every single person's salary, fringe, and everything. Where on this budget, they just want to see it on one line item altogether, lumped together, and then you can separate it in your justification. So they just want basically totals for each category in this section per year. And then if you go to CB1, the budget justification is also just a Word document. And you're going to just copy and paste from our budget justification, all the same information that we use. You can provide them the same templates about escalation rates. You can provide the same templates about CBR rates. And that's about it for the budget justification. Let's go to the next slide, please. For the subcontractors, the budget is exactly the same. The only thing that I've had to do for Caltrans specifically is they wanted a detailed Excel template that breaks down labor and effort by person by fiscal year And I had to create that myself. So I do have that template. If anybody needs it, I'm happy to send it out. But it's also something that you can create yourself. And to make things simple, I just take the subawardees budgets and I plop them into my Word document myself, because you don't want share this document with too many people. This document that you're working on, this Word document, is going to end up being your final contract. So when you work with the state of California, they're going to send it to you and they're going to say, fix this, fix this, fix this. And you can have multiple revisions of the document, because that document is in turn going to turn into the contract. So any changes and adjustments that have to be made before it's signed, it's probably going to come back to you to do it. Next slide, please. On section B3, you get to choose the invoice elements, and we standardized use the state of California to do quarterly invoices. There may be a specific solicitation that requires you to report monthly, but you know, this box will be pre-checked. Don't change it from quarterly to monthly, because you don't want to have to do that every single month. And then it says facsimile electronic approval. I don't know who's still using a fax, but yeah, we're going to send it electronically. And now I'm going to talk a little bit about agency-specific budget templates, and the agency that I'm going to talk about is CEC, the California Energy Commission. Thank you. The California Energy Commission is its own entity. You can call it a state of California entity, but it's really not. It has its own rules. It has its own IDC rate. They do things how they want them. So CEC, depending on your program, will send you the right budget template to fill out. So we always recommend, as with every other template, that you start your budget in our internal template so that you can make sure that all of your tuition and IDC is all done correctly, and then put that into your budget. CEC for EPIC programs cap on salaries, and for peer programs, they call it an estimate. So it's not really a cap, it's kind of like a guideline. But what we suggest doing is, let's say you have a 5-year budget, use the year 5 salary amounts as your max amount in this budget template. That's to ensure that anytime that during the award, that max rate is never going to be exceeded. It's difficult when you have a merit increase that you couldn't plan for, or some type of step increase that you couldn't plan for, because it requires a full-blown rebudget if you want to include those costs. So most of the time, if those things happen, we just make sure that we move off what's not allowed on the fund, or we make sure not to charge anything past whatever the max set rate was. CEC is an exception to the 35% in-state IDC rule. They have 25%. They have negotiated that with UCOP, and that's the way it's been for a bit. I know they've talked about increasing it, but nothing so far has come through. And then some really big, large state of California projects will have a 17.5% rate, and that's like a peer program through CEC, although my peer has 25% IDC. So it's not consistent across the board with peer projects. Another thing that's required for the University of California is to tell them, for the Energy Commission, is to tell them how many dollars you plan to spend in the state of California from this budget. And that has to come from your PI, because there's no way that you can know where they're buying a certain piece of equipment from, where they're buying software from, where they may be traveling to. But keep in mind that all of those charges that could be done out of state, you have to calculate those, get a total, and include it in your budget template. And this is on the first category budget page. And once again, with cost share is required on almost every single CEC solicitation, because they like to make things difficult. And cost share is the same as your budget. You can't put anything on your cost share budget that's not allowed on your main budget. And you can't use your cost share as overflow for things that aren't allowed on the other award. If it's not allowed on the main award, it's not allowed on your cost share award. The other tips that we have are not to name any GSRs, student assistants, or postdocs if possible. This allows for more option when you're hiring, because sometimes people that are named on the award don't end up working for the entire period of the award. And then you've got to submit new people and CDs and have them approved. And then sometimes they ask for a budget reallocation with that as well, because the new postdoc, the new GSR may have a different rate than the people that were on the budget previously. As the state of California, they allow in-state tuition only. NRST is allowed to hit the fund, but it has to be moved off. And for EPIC awards specifically, the GSR appointments have to be set up with job code 3266 so that it decouples your tuition and you can pay it as a CIS payment, because the state of California, or CEC specifically, doesn't want to see tuition in the fringe category. They want to see it under materials and miscellaneous. For peer projects, it's okay to have your tuition hit as long as you send an invoice that says the totals and you just kind of switch them out, right? But when you're proposing and you're managing an EPIC program, they don't allow that. Like I said, if the person's monthly rate exceeds the amount allowed on the fund, the excess must be moved off. And
Angela,
Yes,
question.
ma'am.
In the chat, Marina asked, what is the difference between amount of funds to CBEs and amount of funds to be spent in California? Do you know?
CBE stands for California-based entities. So entities that are based in California but may have locations in other areas would be a CB, the funds spent in California-based entities, and then funds spent in California themselves.
Thank you.
So no problem. And then the state of California considers most vendors as subrecipients, and they want you to provide a justification as such. So we can go to the next slide. Thank you. This has just a couple of examples of what the spreadsheet may look like when you need to prepare a proposal and submit it. It wants the number of person months. It wants the amount that the CEC funds are going to cover. And then you also include your mass share or your cost share. And I've shown a materials and miscellaneous slide on the right-hand side so that you can kind of see how they want to see cost share listed. Gale and UCRP are considered materials and supplies. And everything should be listed here, including tuition and fees. If you guys have questions about how you can sort it on your invoices, I'm happy to help. It just depends on the type of CEC project that you have. Amy is going to talk a lot about the post-award stuff of this award So for proposal purposes, just remember in-state tuition only. CEC has their own travel rates. So and a lot of programs require prior approval before travel. So there are, in your terms and conditions in the travel section, there will be what's allowed, what's not allowed. Out of state to certain states aren't allowed. And then if there's any type of foreign travel, there's a whole process that the PI has to go through before they travel for those costs to be allowed. So even if they had travel in their budget, they still need to ask the PI, the CEC CAM, which is like a project manager, and submit all the necessary information about their travel plans. And the CAM has to accept that and approve it before they can actually travel. In my case, my PI didn't do that. So we were only allowed to use the max California rates for his travel. And we had to move all of the excess off because he didn't get approved for international travel to Canada. You've got to submit like quotes from the hotels, so, that you're actually researching and trying to find the best available rates for your trip. And with that, I'm going to transition back to Angie Martinez, who's going to talk about Exhibit D.
Thank you. For Exhibit D, as a reminder, we often see the bottom half of the form answered, so please be sure to answer the applicable box. This is asking for if the award supports research and development. And for Exhibits C, E through G, they're not included in the proposals submissions, so the state agency will include these in the appropriate exhibits at the post-award stage, if applicable. And we will go into more detail in the award process. So reminders, so if an application is funded, the proposal will be subject to the California Public Records Act. And if you have any questions, please contact your SPO contracting grant officer. So with that, I'm going to transition it to Angela Ford for another poll question.
Okay, poll number 2, get out your pencils. When awarded, the proposal submitted in CMA format will become the award. True or false? Boop, boop, boo. It is true. California Model Agreement provides model contract terms for use by the state of California for research, training, and service activities performed by UC campuses and California State University, California State Universities. So the purpose is to reduce the administrative burden on both the state and universities. Next question. Exhibit A includes the following documents. You're gonna have to listen carefully. Exhibit A, scope of work, contacts, biosketch, and budget. B, scope of work, deliverables, and budget justification. C, scope of work, deliverables, contacts, third-party confidential information. Or D, scope of work, deliverables, contacts, and alternate terms and conditions. The answer is C.
Oh my God, I got it right.
Budget information should be kept in Exhibit B, and the alternate terms and conditions, if they do apply, they're going to show up at award stage in Exhibit G. Okay, and Exhibit B2 budget and budget justification should only be included for subrecipients. Is that true or false?
False.
Ooh, hey, who's saying the answers? It is true. Exhibit B2, subcontractor budgets and budget justifications should not be included for consultants and independent contractors, only subrecipients. Okay, last question in this poll. All key personnel listed in Exhibit A2, key personnel need to include their biosketch, their current and pending, and citizenship in the proposal. True or false? The answer is false. UC Berkeley, in accordance with UC policy, cannot provide citizenship information under sponsored research projects and proposals. That is the standard policy. Don't get us started on DOE proposals. So, because that's a whole nother ball game for those of you guys who do DOE proposals, you know what I mean. But that is the policy. We do not provide that citizenship information. Okay, I'm going to move on to our next thing, which is the award process, and that's Tan who's going to cover that.
When your PI receive an award, please email the award to SPO at spoawards@berkeley.edu. SPO will match up the award with the corresponding proposal and assign it to a CGO to review, negotiate, and process. PB will show the assigned CGO. Your assigned CGO will review the award and ask you to verify the scope of work and budget if needed. Next. When SPO get an award, they are usually one of these 3 types of agreement: the standard agreement, California model agreement. Unless there's a standing approval, we need to get UCOP approval for non-California model agreement. Direct grant award, they usually have almost no terms and conditions and usually come from California Department of Education and some award from a pass-through entity. The first page of any agreement issue under the California Model Agreement format is the standard form STD 213, and then we have Exhibit A to A7 and Exhibit B to B3 highlighted in yellow, populated from the proposal. This is why this information needs to be entered correctly in the proposal because it will become part of the agreement. Exhibit C is the university terms and conditions highlighted in pink. This is pre-negotiated by UCOP. Exhibit D to G Additional terms which may require negotiation by SPO highlighted in blue. Most agreements do not include Exhibit D to G. When a state agency includes terms and conditions in Exhibit D to G, these sections are non-standard, so SPO needs to review those carefully and negotiate these terms. Next, please. This is the signature page for the agreement. Generally, this page will be completed by the agency. They will indicate it if there is anything added for Exhibit D to G. SPO will sign here once terms have been negotiated. Exhibit C, University Terms and Conditions, includes the majority of terms and conditions the award will be subject to, including prior approval like change in scope of work, change in key personnel, whether or not the change has a budgetary impact. So it's important to review this reference document at the start of the project and throughout as needed. The most recently approved version is UTC 220. It's applied to an award for the whole life of the award. So have you ever wondered why the start date in Phoebe doesn't match with the start date on the STD 213? Is it confusing? But here's the clause in the university term and condition regarding the start date. Here's an example of STD 213 with Department of General Services approval. Generally, the last day of approval is the start date. UC Berkeley almost always cite first. So the start date will be either the day the agency signs or the Department of General Services signs. Here's another example of STD 213, where the Department of General Services approval is not needed, so the start date is the last day of approval. Even awards with standard university terms and conditions, there can be acceptance issues which may cause delay. Some examples are the award is required to be in California Model Agreement format. Recall that AB 20 is law and agencies are required to use it. So if an agency doesn't realize this, SPO may need to spend time working through that with the agency. Another example could be an agency using the California Model Agreement format, but they include additional terms and conditions to the scope of work, or maybe the budget section. In that case, SPO works with the sponsor to move the appropriate terms and conditions to what is called Exhibit G. It is usually not an easy task to make these changes because SPO need to ensure terms don't conflict with the university term and condition that already exist, or if we are going to agree to an exception, it is reasonable one that on UC campuses could live with. Next bullet point is a good example of an agency including terms in inappropriate places in the new Bureau of Cannabis Control Award. BCC is a new agency and they had not issued grant award before, so it took some time and effort to negotiate reasonable non-California model agreement terms. One other example of issue that come up with a stay award is when UC Berkeley is a subawardee. Many institutions that are not UC or CSU agree to terms and conditions with the state that we would consider unfavorable. An example is work for hire, language where the state would own everything created by UC Berkeley without rights for UC Berkeley faculty to use for any purpose. UC policy doesn't allow us to accept restricted terms like this. So SPO either works to get the university terms and conditions to apply to UC Berkeley performers or negotiate other IP terms which allow UC Berkeley to own what it creates. Amendments can be initiated by UC Berkeley or state agency. These changes are usually for a NOCA extension, rebudget, change in scope, change PI key personnel. If a PI wants to make changes to an award, the request should be routed through SPO first. PI should work with BRS-RA to initiate the Phoebe award action request and route the request to SPO for review and submission. If the request is approved by the state agency, they will issue an official award amendment to document changes to an award. SPO will review the amendment to make sure the information on the amendment matches with the existing award. If no award term have changed, the amendment will be processed and released. Now I'm going to hand it back to Angela Ford for pose question.
Thanks, Ton. Okay, poll number 3, and this might be our last poll depending on how time is. So we have 4 more poll questions. Get out your pencils. Here we go. If the state of California issues a request for a proposal or an RFP, UC may submit the proposal in a different format from the CMA. True or false? The answer to that is true. A state agency may require us to use a specific format for submitting a proposal. And while the university wants to, it's best if we use our CMA forms. If it is for a RFP, we want our investigators to be competitive with the other people, or the other entities or other investigators submitting proposals from other organizations. So we do encourage our PIs to use the format that is required in an RFP. And as Tom mentioned, at award stage, what may happen at that point is we convert it into a CMA format. Next question. If a proposal requires a proposal revision to be submitted to the California State Agency, SPO requires a new Phoebe record. Is this true, false, or it depends? And the answer is it depends. If the scope of work has changed, or if adding funds or time not originally proposed, there we may ask that a new Phoebe record is routed. Okay, next question. Who needs to review state of California terms and conditions listed in Exhibit G? Is it A, SPO? Is it B, SPO, PI, CGA, and BRS? Or is it C, PI only? Or is it D, all CSUs and UC campuses? The answer is B. Terms and conditions in Exhibit G would need to be reviewed and negotiated by SPO. However, changes in Exhibit G can impact all stakeholders, and when you get an award, you should be reviewing all the terms involved. Last question. When working with business contracts and brand protection, so BCBP, State of California proposals should not use the CMA format. Is that true or false? Okay, this assumes there's no RFP. I'm giving you a hint there. Okay, the answer is false. AB 20 also governs campus business contracts with the state of California. So when you are sending something through BCBP, you should also be using that CMA format. Okay, I'm going to now pass it on to Angela Brito Baldwin, who's going to cover award management.
Hi again. So I'm just going to cover parts of award management, and then I'm going to pass it on to my cohort. I'm just going to reiterate a bunch of things that we did. When you get a California agreement, they're going to ask you to revise it multiple times, and your PI is not going to want to do it, so he's going to send it to you. My Caltrans had almost 24 versions of this document that we went through before we got to the final, and my California Housing Department had 12 versions before we got to the final. So there's going to be a lot of back and forth. Also, if you're like me, if you're an RA, you don't want your PI to touch your stuff. So, you know, if he does want to go in there or she want to go in there and touch the template, it's a Word document. So you know that if you hit space in the wrong place, it's going to send all the tables that you've got in there all funky. So be really careful. And I just tell my PIs, just tell me what you want to change, or the sponsor will tell me and I'll do it myself. Domestic travel, state of California prohibits travel to any discriminatory states. So if you check the website, it'll give you some information about what's allowed and what's not allowed, and where you can travel to get reimbursement and where you can't. This is important if you're planning and you're budgeting conferences and stuff like that. You want to make sure that the conferences are in states that are going to allow that are allowable per travel and that we can get reimbursed for those charges. SPO says that they haven't heard that non-resident tuition is across the board disallowed at State of California. So it's a department by department kind of decision. So you'll check to see on RFPs whether or not the non-resident tuition is allowable. I can tell you right now, Caltrans will absolutely not allow NRST, and CEC will allow you to hire an international person, but you have to take the NRST fees off of the budget. And then inconsistent requests. I know I saw Sarah giggling, but every program manager, or CAM is a program manager at CEC, will want things presented in a different way. Some will ask you to create a template to give them a breakdown. Some will ask for a paragraph of a justification. Some may ask for you to bold this and highlight that and turn this font red and strike through here, while others say don't do any of that and just kind of highlight what you changed. So it's going to be a case-by-case basis when you're working with your CAM. And if you do a lot of proposals, like right now I've got a bunch of CECs and I'm lucky enough to get the same CAM, so I already know what he wants to see from me. And that's going to make that a whole lot easier. And spreadsheets everywhere. CEC specifically has 3 different templates that they want you to use: a proposal, a budget worksheet, and an award management template. And that's besides the templates that we do in-house ourselves. So with that, for a little bit more detail on the templates and how to prepare them, I'm going to pass you to Amy Fritzen.
Hello, everyone. As Angela said, I'm going to focus on the post-award side of things, specifically when dealing with CEC. So one of the biggest pain points for working with CEC is the spending report that's required. You'll have to complete this hopefully only on a quarterly basis. I had to do mine on a monthly, which was a nightmare. But CEC will give you a template for this. It's going to be an Excel document, and it's going to look just like your CEC budget that was submitted during the pre-award phase. So it's going to have tabs for things like direct labor costs, fringe, equipment, materials, travel, etc. You'll need to fill in every expense for that reporting period in the appropriate tab. I very highly recommend when you're doing this that you use your budget as your guide. That's because in general, if the expense wasn't listed in your budget, then it really shouldn't be in your spending report without prior approval. The only exception, at least that I know to this, is that if you're buying new materials, if the line item is less than $5,000, then you should be okay to add it to the spend report without getting prior approval. Something else to note with CEC is that they are super strict with category limits. So for instance, if you budgeted $10,000 for materials and you end up spending $10,001, you'll need to move that extra dollar off of the award. Or you'll need to submit a request to do a budget reallocation, which is something I'll talk about later. So every CEC project is categorized into different types based on the research. So the 2 I know of are Peer and Epic, but there's others as well out there. If you're unfortunate enough to get an Epic award, then unfortunately things get even more strict. I think this was mentioned previously, but there'll be monthly caps on each person's salary and fringe benefits rates. And these you can't go over. Caps are set during the pre-award phase, so it's really important to set these correctly, thinking about things like potential merit increases and cost of living adjustments, the best you can do. If it's an Epic award, there'll also be caps on the subcategory spending amounts. So for instance, if you break down your materials and supplies category into different subcategories, like there's one just for computer supplies, those caps have to be adhered to as well. So you can't spend over what you budgeted. And then for all projects, the spending report is going to include cost share. As previously mentioned, almost all CEC awards also include cost share, just to be extra fun. So you'll need to report all the same things for any cost share expenses that were charged during the reporting period.
Hey, Amy, can I jump in and say something? Yvonne in the comments let us know that as of September 2023, the travel restriction no longer applies within the state of California to those discriminatory states. I provided the link in the chat if anybody wants to look at it, but please disregard everything I said about travel to discriminatory states because that was lifted in September 2023. I haven't had any travel expenses since then, so I didn't know that. Thank you, Yvonne, so much.
Yeah, there are a lot of changes, so it's hard to kind of keep up with everything. So thank you for mentioning that. If we can go to the next slide, that would be great. Okay, so once you're done filling out this big template, you're not quite done yet. There's several documents that need to be appended to it. So another thing that's a big pain with CEC is that they want backup documentation for just about everything. If you bought any materials or supplies greater than $5,000, you need to attach the receipt to your spending report. Same thing with travel expenses. Keep those receipts, append those to your spending report. You don't need to include receipts for food items, but everything else should be included. Also, make sure you're adhering to CEC's rates for things like lodging, because they have their own rates. If there's cost share included in this report, you'll also need to append the cost share contribution report. You'll need to report the percent of funds spent in California for each budget category. And I was asked to at least, so you might need to include technical progress reports with the spend report that you would get from the PI. So you put that all together to send off to CEC. But the last thing that needs to be included is all the information from subawards. So as mentioned, CEC projects are usually really large and they often include subawards. So not only are you filling out your own spending report every quarter, but each subaward that's given $100,000 or more, they have to complete their own spending report each quarter as well. They have to send that to you so you can include it in your report. So they need to fill it out exactly the same way that you do, all the same restrictions apply. I would highly recommend reviewing your subaward spend reports before approving any subaward payments. And that's just because if something is included in that spend report that shouldn't be, it needs to be removed from the invoice. Next slide. Okay, so what happens if you do need to make a budget change? You know, you need to buy something that you didn't have your crystal ball and you didn't realize during the pre-award phase that you were going to need. Like this happens all the time. There luckily is a process for this. You need to request a budget reallocation. You'll need to, you'll want to communicate definitely with SPO to make this happen, but also a lot with your CAM, your CEC point of contact, because all budget changes need to go through them. Every CAM is different, so it's kind of hard to generalize, but they'll tell you what they want you to do for a budget reallocation request. But in general, you'll need to send them a revised budget and you'll mark every item that is new with a little drop-down button saying this is something you're adding. You'll also need to fill out a justification form. It's a Word document, a template that they'll send you, just outlining exactly why those changes are needed, why they're going to benefit the project, why you didn't think of them ahead of time, etc. So you should wait for a response from your CAM before proceeding. Hopefully they'll give you the okay and you'll be able to spend your money the way that you want. You can make the changes that you're requesting. Okay, next slide. All right, just some other tips and advice. I won't go over all of this because some of it's been talked about before. But a tip with tuition, again, they don't want tuition to hit the ledger as a fringe benefit. So you can get around this by setting up the GSR appointment with a job code of 3266 that decouples tuition from the appointment, and then you can just pay the tuition and fees with a CIS payment. I also really recommend good communication. So because CEC is way more strict than most sponsors, and the projects are often really large and involve a lot of people. I recommend communicating all of these restrictions and requirements to everyone that's involved in the project. And do this early on. Make sure your PI and co-PIs know what's expected of them. Talk to the other RAs that are involved. Communicate with CGA so you can work on those spending reports. And definitely talk to all subawards so that they understand, what's required of them and they understand the strict restrictions. Just get everyone on the same page so there's no surprises or misunderstandings. I also encourage you to create a good relationship with your CAM. So be nice to them. They can make your life much harder if they want to. So if you have a good working relationship with them, they can also make your life easier. And lastly, just don't try and reinvent the wheel. Some of us have already managed CEC awards, so ask for help if you need it. You can look up CEC awards in Phoebe to get some reference there, to see what others have done, or you can reach out to folks that have worked on CEC awards directly for help. And now I'm going to pass it back to Angela Ford.
Thank you, Amy. We've got about 10 more minutes, so I might breeze through some of this stuff real quick. I have an update on Caltrans, and then, although I don't think it will sufficiently deal with some of the issues that have been brought up by my colleagues in this presentation, but what I do want to say is that Caltrans has become increasingly more difficult, I would say, in the last few years. And there have been quite a bit of ongoing challenges in the whole span of contracting process. Angela Brito Baldwin mentioned the 24 times that, a proposal had to be changed. That was even before it made it to SPO, I'm assuming. Is that right, Angela? Yeah, that's just incredible. And so the whole contracting process completely protracted. This isn't just related to the work that even SPO has to do. We have very long negotiation process with Caltrans, PIs, RAs. This is happening at all UC campuses and CSUs. Everyone's having very challenging times with Caltrans. And then even within Caltrans, they're having their own challenges amongst themselves. So a lot of times what my understanding is a program person, they're called contract managers. They'll work on a draft with a PI, they'll send it up for approval, and then it'll come back with a whole bunch of red lines, and they're told they have to redo it, do it this way, change it again. So even within Caltrans, there isn't some kind of alignment on what should be in a scope of work. And so UCOP has been working on identifying where all parties can work together to improve the contracting process. So they've formed a working group. This working group has UC people on it, Caltrans people, I think CSUs are consulting. It's really to identify people's roles, handoffs between the organizations, both at proposal level, award level, all across the map. And I'm one of the campus representatives for that. It's really been enlightening. I just want to give you guys a sense of how confused people are. Or I would say the Caltrans, our understanding of each other. So Caltrans thinks that all this work that they've done, when they tell a PI, okay, you can submit this, that's a proposal in our eyes, right? So we think that we're submitting them a proposal. Caltrans sees that as we're done with negotiations. This is a done agreement. But really what it is the start of a negotiation process for the UC or the CSU. So there's not even a really good understanding of the process between the two organizations. So the goal really is to get both sides to really understand each other's processes and to really do some education and training on the Caltrans side to use the existing CMA terms to support their management of the project. So rather than drafting completely different terms and conditions, which increases the burden to all parties, UCOP is working to help Caltrans program side understand that there are terms in the UTC 220 that already address some of the concerns that you have, like if you need an additional progress report, like if you need to do something like you want to see the detail of a budget, you don't need to put terms and conditions in the award for that. It's already covered in UCC 220. You can get a copy of a ledger, for example. So hopefully this working group is going to make some really great inroads. I'm crossing my fingers because I do remember a time when contracting with Caltrans was relatively easy when the CMA first came out, but it has progressively gotten worse. So I think, and it's come to the attention of UC Office of the President and the Chancellor's side at CSU, which is the equivalent of UC Office of the President. Okay, so I was going to give some quick tips on Caltrans. I am concerned about time, so you guys can see them there. Really what I'll say is to keep an eye on what is going in Exhibit A. If you notice something, I know it's not the job of RAs to deal with this, but if you do notice, you see terms and conditions in there, you can just let SPO know. You can put a note in Phoebe. You can let us be the heaviest to tell PIs, you got to remove that kind of stuff before a proposal will go out, or SPO can talk to the Caltrans folks. The other thing that we've been seeing in budgets is task budgets and being asked to put detailed task budgets in addition to the budget that Angela Grudo Baldwin mentioned in her part of the presentation, which is that kind of high level budget period budget. So they have started asking for that kind of information, and we highly advise against including those detailed budgets and getting SPO involved in that process if they're asking you for that, because they shouldn't be doing that. And I think UCOP is aware that is an issue. Okay, few more minutes, 5 more minutes. So I'm going to I have some great tips here from Katie Hudson, who provided these from CGA, and I just wanted to share them with you really quick. Some of this stuff we talked about in one way or another during the presentation. The first is about invoice backup. It's just a suggestion to really work closely with CGA when there is intense backup requirements, similar to, I think what Amy was talking about with CEC is a really great example of the intense amount of backup that's needed. I think Angela Grudo Baldwin mentioned it too. Okay, so what I really wanted to focus on is reversion of funds, because this has come up in various situations. I've also been emailed about this. So the standard CMA Exhibit B, which is the budget, has fund reversion language. So it states, unless otherwise specified as following, fund reversion dates are 3 years from fiscal year end of a year funded. So what CGA has asked that I highlight today is that some agencies will have funds to revert before the project end date. So this is something to watch out for on any state award, but especially when a PI requests a no-cost extension or multiple no-cost extensions, because the reversion dates may not change, even if they're providing, the agency is allowing no-cost extensions. So that's the standard language in Exhibit B. What CGA also provided was a very specific example of what CARB they've seen in some agreements, and here's a CARB example. State monies from fiscal year 20 to 21 will revert to the state treasury on June 30, 2023, and will no longer be available to pay our contractors. To meet all invoice deadlines for such contracts, invoices must be received in our office by May 1, 2023. So obviously that means if they have to receive the invoice, that means final billing is actually preceding the project end date, which really means that a PI doesn't get to spend an entire budget, or if they do, if they are, it's going to have to be within that time period. Okay, so really the bottom line is look for these reversion of funds sections when you receive an award, and they will be in Exhibit B. Okay, so that's it. I'm going to skip poll 4. I'm going to ask really quick, did anybody get 11 questions right? I'm going to stop share. Did anybody get 11 questions right? I'm going to look in the chat. I can't even, where's the chat here? Okay, 11. And okay, how about 10? Did anybody get 10 right? 10 right, 10 right, 10 right, 10 right. Ooh, Sarah. Type your name in the chat if you got 10. Oh, Marina, yay, Marina. And Sarah, oh, great. Okay, I think it's between the two of you, so I think both of you are going to get a little something from me. Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you for taking time to stick with us through this very complicated process.
Hey,
Now
Angela.
I'm going to pass it back to Sarah. Oh, go ahead, Angela.
We have a question in the chat. Lamont asks about State of California awards, and she says she was recently told it would take 45 minutes to receive a pass from SPO, 45 days to receive a pass from SPO after the award has been negotiated. Do you have any idea the timeline it takes for State of California awards in negotiations after the award has been received by UCB?
Angela, sorry. My intention was not only State of California. I was told that in general, any proposal, like any award, not proposal, sorry, any award, it's taking around 45 days. Is that true? And if yes, why? Thank you.
Thanks, Lamont. Nice to hear from you.
Likewise,
I
Angela,
would
thank you.
I would say that 45 days actually has to do with negotiation. So if an award has to go through a negotiation process, it usually takes SPO, because we have so many awards, we're also short-staffed. It does take about 45 days to get a award fully negotiated and executed. That actually is, so if it was like, Lamont, let me say, if it was something like NSF and there was no COI, there was no kind of special review issue there, like animals, humans, or anything like that, that should automatically go through. I think that 45-day really has to do with awards that require negotiation. But we can talk more offline if you have any
Yes.
specific questions.
Sure. Yes, yes. I will email you. Thank you so much.
All right.
All right, let's give a round of applause to our presenters. Thank you all, SPO and URSO folks. And thank you everyone for taking time out of your busy schedule to attend today's BRAG meeting. We are putting a link to a short survey in chat. Please take a few minutes to provide feedback on today's meeting and make recommendations on future topics. We will also send the survey out in an email, so don't worry if you can't fill it out right now. Our next BRAG event will be May 2nd. From 11:30 to 1:30 Pacific Standard Time. This will be an in-person RA appreciation event. The event has been added to your calendar and an RSVP was sent out earlier this month. If you missed that email, don't worry. I'm sure I'm going to ask Sarah to send out a reminder.
Great.
Cool. Thanks, everyone.
All right. Thank you all.
Have a great rest of your week.